Hello, class. Mr. Maynard here with a brief lecture on this week's topic. This week we're going to be examining religious oppression, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. Religious oppression is unfortunately something that affects people of every faith tradition, across nearly every part of the world. It can appear as subtle exclusion, like jokes, stereotypes, or job discrimination, or as overt violence, legal restriction, or even genocide. Throughout history, many faith groups have faced persecution. Christians under Rome, Muslims under colonial rule, Jews during countless expulsions and pogroms, Hindus and Sikhs in South Asia, Buddhists in East Asia, and indigenous peoples in the Americas. For this class, we're going to narrow our focus to religious oppression as it appears in the United States, especially towards two faiths: Judaism, often targeted through anti-Semitism, and Islam, targeted through Islamophobia. It's important to note that this is not an exhaustive list. Every religious group has faced prejudice at some point in history. But studying these two cases helps us understand how bias develops, how it's reinforced by culture and media, and how we can respond to it today. Notice the symbols to the right. Notice how each symbol represents a major faith tradition. These symbols remind us that while religion divides some people, it can also unite others through shared values of compassion and justice. We will begin with a quick overview of Judaism. Judaism is one of the oldest Abrahamic faiths, meaning it shares its spiritual ancestry with both Christianity and Islam. All three religions trace their heritage to the patriarch Abraham, who is seen as a figure of faith and covenant. The Jewish story begins over 3,000 years ago in the ancient Middle East. It's grounded in a covenant, a sacred promise between God and the Jewish people. The Torah, which means teaching or law, outlines the moral and ethical foundations of this relationship. Judaism isn't just a religion. It's also a culture and communal identity. Being Jewish can mean belonging to a shared history, a people, and a way of life. Jewish beliefs. At the core of Judaism is the belief in one God, a God who is just, compassionate, and calls people to moral action. Jewish life emphasizes ethical living, community, and lifelong learning. Jewish observance centers around sacred practices. The Sabbath, from Friday evening to Saturday evening, is a day of rest and renewal. Passover celebrates the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt, reminding the faithful of the importance of freedom and recalling the Exodus journey. And Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, focuses on forgiveness and reflection. Acts of charity and the pursuit of justice are seen as essential responsibilities in the Jewish faith. Through study, worship, and community, Jews express gratitude for God's guidance and reaffirm their collective resilience, a theme that has carried them through centuries of persecution. Unfortunately, Jewish history is also marked by repeated waves of persecution. In medieval Europe, Jews were often scapegoated for society's current problems. They were accused of poisoning wells during the plagues, and often blamed for financial crises. Jews were often forced into ghettos, expelled from countries like England and Spain, and subjected to forced conversions to Christianity. In Eastern Europe and Russia, organized mob attacks called pogroms destroyed Jewish homes and synagogues. Families fled, often with nowhere safe to go. The most horrific example of anti-Semitism came during the Holocaust, between 1941 and 1945, when Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million Jews in an attempt to erase an entire people. These tragedies weren't isolated. They were the result of centuries of stereotyping and dehumanization. You see, when hatred is normalized, it can evolve from social prejudice to systemic violence. That's why understanding the early signs of oppression is so important. Many Jewish immigrants came to America in the 19th and early 20th centuries seeking freedom and safety. Yet, anti-Semitism was present here too. Some job postings or rental ads explicitly stated Gentiles only, or excluded Jewish applicants through coded language. These weren't isolated incidents, they reflected a broader culture of exclusion towards the Jewish people. Industrialist Henry Ford, one of America's most influential figures, made anti-Semitism mainstream in the 1920s by publishing The International Jew, a series of writings that promoted false conspiracy theories about Jewish control of the world economy. These publications directly influenced Nazi ideology in Germany. Jewish Americans were also barred from certain neighborhoods, universities, and social clubs through restrictive covenants and quotas. And though public sentiment has improved, anti-Semitic hate crimes remain among the most common religious-based offenses in the U.S. today. So, a question for reflection. What happens when prejudice is given a platform by influential figures? How does that change what society can deem as acceptable? Like Judaism and Christianity, Islam is an Abrahamic faith that emphasizes worship of one God and moral responsibility. Islam was founded in the 7th century CE by the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca. Muslims believe Prophet Muhammad is the final prophet in a long chain that includes Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. The sacred text of Islam, the Quran, is seen as the word of God revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. It emphasizes compassion, justice, equality, and submission to God's will. Submission being the literal meaning of the word Islam. Islam's teachings share many parallels with both Judaism and Christianity, yet cultural misunderstandings have often overshadowed these connections. Islam is guided by 5 essential practices known as the 5 pillars of Islam. The first is the Shahada, or faith, which is declaring belief in one God, Allah, and that Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. The second pillar is Salat, or prayer, and this is performing the 5 daily prayers facing Mecca. The third pillar is Zakat, or charity, which is giving a portion of one's income to those in need. This is also called almsgiving. The fourth pillar of Islam is Swam, or fasting, which is observing the fast during Ramadan, which is an entire month of fasting that takes place from daylight to dark throughout the month. And finally, the fifth pillar of Islam is Hajj, or the pilgrimage, which is traveling to Mecca, where every Muslim must travel to Mecca at least once in their life, if physically and financially able to do so. You might notice some similarities between these rituals and some of the rituals we see in other religions, such as fasting in Christianity or giving alms in Judaism. As a reflection question, think about this. What values seem to overlap across all 3 of these faiths? Muslims have also experienced widespread oppression and misrepresentation, especially during and after European colonialism. Colonial powers often portrayed Muslim societies as uncivilized or dangerous to justify domination. This pattern of bias is called Orientalism. It created the stereotypes that still linger in Western culture today. In the modern era, acts of terrorism by extremist groups have unfairly shaped public perceptions of all Muslims. The vast majority of Muslims worldwide reject such violence, yet the association persists. After September 11, 2001, global Islamophobia surged. Mosques were burned, people were harassed, and Muslim communities were surveilled in the name of national security. These global patterns set the stage for the prejudice and discrimination that we see for Muslim communities in the United States. Islam's history in America goes back centuries. Many enslaved Africans brought to the U.S. were Muslim, but their faith was suppressed under slavery. In the 20th century, Muslim immigrants from places like Syria, Lebanon, and South Asia established communities and built mosques, but they still faced suspicion and exclusion. After 9/11, Islamophobia intensified dramatically. Hate crimes spiked, Muslims were profiled at airports, and mosque vandalisms increased. The 2017 Muslim travel ban further legitimized fear and division by restricting entry from Muslim-majority communities. Despite these challenges, Muslim Americans have continued to contribute to every field: education, medicine, art, business, and public service, demonstrating strength and resilience. A question for reflection: how does national security fear sometimes become an excuse for discrimination? What could have been done differently after 9/11 to prevent bias from spreading? The escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in October 2023 reignited tensions globally, leading to a sharp rise in both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic hate crimes in the U.S. Jewish and Muslim Americans both reported harassment, vandalism, and online threats. These patterns remind us of how quickly fear and misinformation can spiral into prejudice. It's critical to separate political conflicts from religious identity. Our focus should be on empathy, recognizing that both Jewish and Muslim communities experience trauma when global conflicts are misrepresented in domestic spaces. While, as we've noted, Judaism and Islam face significant discrimination, other religious groups in the U.S. have also suffered. Sikh Americans have often been attacked because people mistakenly associate turbans with Islam. Hindu and Buddhist Americans face misunderstanding often about their beliefs. Native Americans were forbidden from practicing their traditional ceremonies until 1978, when the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed. Atheists and those without religious affiliation can also experience social stigma or exclusion for their lack of belief. True religious freedom doesn't just protect people of faith. It also protects the right to not believe. As we close on today's lecture, I want to stress this. Understanding the history of religious oppression isn't just about studying the past. It's about recognizing patterns that we can interrupt today. When we protect someone else's right to worship, or someone's right to not worship, we strengthen our